So beautiful.
Okay, Prabhu, do you want to pull up the verse, or how do we do this?
I can do that. Just give me a moment. I need to set the live stream in motion, and then I'll pull up the verse.
Otherwise, while you're doing that, we're just going to do Om Namo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Rayanam Namaskritya Naranchayam Narotamam Devam Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamuraya Nasta Prashu Bhadreshu Etam Bhagavati Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhagavati Naishtaki. So we have the verse, I think. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm still working on it. Can you say something uplifting?
Yeah,
please?
yeah. I don't know about uplifting, but we can pray to Srila Prabhupada for sure. We'll pray to Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani Nivishesha Sunnivari Pasatyadi Shacharani. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Shittamate Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Bhakti Tirtha Namane. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasri Gaura Bhakta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitya Gauranga, Krishna's magic. Here we go. Good morning, William.
Morning. William's here. Henry's here now too.
Oh, our dear friend Henry.
Sorry, God.
Okay, so do I read the verse or do you read the
Yes.
verse? Okay. So this is where in Bhagavatam 10:23, text 8. Dikshaya Pashu Shamstayaha Dotramanas Manyascha Satamaha Anyatra Dikshitashyapi Nannam Asnam Hidushati. And we do the word for word. Dikshayaha, the beginning of the initiation for a sacrifice. Pashu Shamstayaha, outside of the sacrifice known as Sotramani, Cha and Satamaha, O purest one, Anyatra, elsewhere. Dikshitashya, of one who has been initiated for the sacrifice. Api, even. Na, not. Anam, food. Asnan, eating. Indeed, Dishati creates offense. Translation. Srila Prabhupada's translation. Okay, except during the interval between the initiation of the performer of a sacrifice and the actual sacrifice of the animal, almost for pure brahmanas, it is not contaminating for even the initiated to partake of food, at least in sacrifices other than the Sotramani. Do you want to read the purport?
The cowherd boys anticipated the possible objection from the brahmanas that they couldn't give the boys any food because they themselves had not yet eaten, and that a priest initiated to perform the sacrifice should not eat. Therefore, the boys humbly informed the brahmanas after various technicalities of ritualistic sacrifice. The cowherd boys were not unaware of the formalities of Vedic culture, but their real intention was simply to render loving service to Lord Krishna.
Hey, and okay, this next verse.
Yeah, verse 9.
Do you want me to do the Sanskrit on this one also? Do you want us, or do you want?
No, we can just go to the translation and
I
purport.
think it's a kind of a little bit in the same mood. The Brahmanas heard this supplication from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, yet they refused to pay heed. Indeed, they were full of petty desires and entangled in elaborate rituals. Though presuming themselves advanced in Vedic learning, they were actually inexperienced fools. Well, Prabhu.
These childish brahmanas were full of petty desires, such as the desire to attain to material heaven, and therefore they could not recognize the golden transcendental opportunity offered them by the arrival of Krishna's personal boyfriends. Presently, throughout the world, people are madly pursuing material advancement and thus cannot hear the message of the Supreme Lord Krishna that is being broadcast through the missionary activities of the Krishna consciousness movement. Times have hardly changed, and proud materialistic priests are still prevalent on the earth.
Oh, Magana Timirandasya Gana Gana Shalakaya Chekshu Metamina. That's my sugar lima. I think we already said the prayers. Okay, dear devotees. So Ekavira Prabhu is with us today. I'm so excited because normally he has all these things that he's doing, and I end up being the one here. And so today I'm grateful to Ekavira Prabhu that you change all your things around to be with us today. Okay. So these two verses, this chapter is so instructive, and it's so beautiful, such a beautiful chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, this chapter 23. And every verse in this chapter instructs us in some way in our bhakti, helps us to understand how to surrender to Srila Prabhupada's mission, Lord Chaitanya's mission, and how to daily incorporate some of these amazing, beautiful practices that we are hearing from this pastime. So I'm going to start out, and then I'm turning it over to Ekavira Prabhu. Just because that's how we do it in our family. Ekavira lets me get all the whatever it is that's like, if we're in a storm, he puts me in the front, and then he comes and he's like, okay, I'm here, I got you, but I'm in the front. So anyway, I get the heat first. It's okay though, because I think Krishna can allow me to take it. So this verse, these two verses basically are sharing with us about the importance of really not being ritualistic, and to understand the purpose of rituals. What are rituals for? And to understand the purpose of our relationship actually with Krishna as Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. So both of these texts are focusing on the mood of these brahmanas and the mood of the Lord's devotees, the cowherd boys. And so in one sense, we could think about it as, maybe us in terms of inside of us. Sometimes we're like having the mood of a brahmana sometimes, and sometimes we're having the mood of like a cowherd boy. And I know about all of you, but I know sometimes I'm kind of like that. Sometimes inside of me, I'm ritualistic like anything. And then there are times when I'm like realizing, no, that's just not what's going to get the attention of Krishna. So then within my own self, I'm always going through what this pastime is speaking about. And so in an attempt to try to be not ritualistic today by thinking that I know anything, I'm going to share about these brahmanas, not in a way to be judgmental, because these are elevated personalities. However, the mood that Srila Prabhupada is bringing in these purport and these texts is to help us to understand the consciousness that a person is to have when they engage in anything, any activity. And Prabhupada explains that in that verse, Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasham Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, he explains that all sacrifices, whatever we do, anything that we do, is actually meant for the pleasure of Krishna. This is the purpose. And so we see in the details of this pastime that these brahmanas, they're offering this yagya. I think it was called, I did look that up. It's called, what was the name of that yagya? It was called the something. Anyway, it's a specific yagya. And that particular yagya that they're doing, apparently as Srila Prabhupada explains, that they didn't have to treat the cowherd boys the way they did, which was by ignoring them and kind of like just avoiding to give attention to their requests. The boys were there requesting, as you all know, requesting some food, right? They were hungry. And these brahmanas who were supposed to be so very elevated, they totally ignored these boys. They pretended not to hear the boys. So here Prabhupada is helping us to understand this ritualistic mood that when a person engages in any kind of ritual, if they're not doing it specifically for Krishna, then it's kind of very offensive in how, they may treat other people. So in this case, these brahmanas, they as I said earlier, they were kind of neglecting these boys, pretending they're not hearing them. And they're giving this argument, which they didn't say anything. However, as we read in these texts, one of the arguments is that because they were initiated brahmanas, supposedly when you're doing the sacrifice, you're not supposed to touch any food, and until the offering is actually done, you're not supposed to do anything with the food. And so this was a part of the ritual, and the boys were aware of this. They understood that what the brahmanas were saying, the conclusion of what the brahmanas were saying was absolutely not proper, not correct. Because I think in the text it mentioned something about, the Sotramani. That was the only time. That's the only time, apparently, that kind of a yagya is the only time that these brahmanas were obligated to those principles that they were sharing with these Kahari boys. Again, I'm sorry, they didn't say anything. However, that was the assumption that because they're doing this, yagya, they can't stop anything to give these boys any food, and they can't really even give them any attention. And so here are these boys that come in directly from Krishna, directly from the Lord. So something that kind of caught my attention with this in a practical way is how oftentimes, a devotee may approach someone for something. For example, we are engaged in distributing books, or we're engaged in so many different activities. And oftentimes people don't really understand who is a devotee. They don't understand this mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They don't understand Srila Prabhupada. And the devotees, they go out of their way in order to bring this mission to people in general. This is Prabhupada's mood, spiritualize the whole world. And so the devotees are very dedicated. So the devotees are actually carriers of Krishna. They're bringing Krishna. However, most people, they don't accept. Now here, this example of these brahmanas, they are getting this opportunity really to serve Krishna. However, because they're so engaged in their materialistic desires to go to the heavenly planets, this was the mood of the yagya they were performing, that they were unable to really appreciate these cowherd boys. Actually, they thought of them as even low-class vaishyas. They didn't have any understanding because they're so caught in the rituals. And that's the same mood of people in this world, because people are so conditioned, they're so hurt, they're so suffering in so many ways. They're unable to hear, in many cases, the devotees. And we all know we're living in real troubled times. And so the devotees are more obligated now than ever. They're more responsible now than ever to bring this message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to bring just basic things like distribution of food, distribution of prasadam, like Adipurusha Prabhu does every day. Just these are things that we know will help suffering humanity. At the same time, they're not, in many cases, people are becoming more receptive because it's just getting so crazy. However, in most cases, they're still not so receptive. So these brahmanas are kind of an example like that. They were brahmanas from another yuga. You'd think that they were Kali Yuga brahmanas, but they weren't. They were from Dwapara Yuga, and they had that mood of material desires, material consciousness being prominent for them. So here we are in Kali Yuga, right? And we're faced, as devotees, to try to connect with people in this world. It's not so easy. However, we're backed by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we're backed by Srila Prabhupada, and we're backed by these wonderful, great devotees that are teaching us, just going on, doing this, being accountable to who we are as Vaishnavas. So I'm going to turn this over to Ekavira because, it's important that Ekavira brings us into really some of the philosophical understanding of this pastime. I'm okay.
I don't know about philosophical aspects of this.
Well, these brahmanas they're not hearing. So what's happening with not hearing? What happens when I don't hear what you say?
Are you really?
I don't know. Okay.
So the brahmanas, they heard Krishna's cowherd friends, but at the same time, they didn't hear them. And I wonder, do we find ourselves in situations like this, actually having our ears open and hearing but not hearing? And of course, as Reginald expressed, that they didn't acknowledge the cowherd boys because they had another agenda. They had a certain agenda. And this particular pastime, all of the pastimes in Srimad Bhagavatam are special. And it's, of course, in the 10th canto, they're so sweet and always instructive. And this particular pastime is some kind of like hyperbole, and that these are actually eternal associates of the Supreme Lord. And in this particular case, they're covered by Krishna's internal potency to act in such a way so that we can learn from this given situation. And so we see that that the cowherd boys, they came and they asked the cowherd, the brahmanas, for some food, and even told that the food was for the Supreme Lord. And Rajalili, you spoke about, the purpose of all of the yagnas is to please the Supreme Lord, Yagya Purusha. And so the guest, receiving of guests, this point of receiving guests is significant in this pastime. This is something that we can actually learn from. And I remember when coming to Gita Nagari, and Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he said, Ekavira Das, I want you to learn everything. I want you to engage in not only the temple worship and everything in the temple, but I want you to engage in agriculture and care for the cows, go Raksha. I want you to learn constructions and mechanics, work with vehicles. And I looked at him with a really mood of curiosity. How in the world am I going to learn all these things? I was one that did not like to even get my hands dirty, still don't. And so, and then he expressed, and then when you learn all of these things, always remember that the success of the project or any project is based upon how you receive guests. And that stood out for me. Even though he wanted me to learn all of these different details, the culmination of these details, the realization of doing these particular services was to actually understand that we never really know who is actually coming into our midst, who's coming to our association and company. I remember Peter Burwash, he would express that, I go to the temples all around the world. The temples are not in the vicinity which is easy to access. So people have to really make some effort to actually come to our temples. And in general, even if persons are not coming to the temples, they're coming to our association at our houses, they're coming into, our association on the streets, whatever. And they're coming and they understand that we're actually sharing Krishna Katha. They're actually making special effort to go against the grain of Kali Yuga, to hear the message of Vasudeva. And that's a rare soul. That's a rare soul. Even if one is not a direct representative of the Supreme Lord, sometimes we can hear from the spiritual master. Sometimes we can hear from the spiritual master, and we, of course, that's how we actually understand, the process of devotional services, through hearing from the spiritual master and those great souls, the sadhus. At the same time, can we hear from, our peers? Many times we can actually get even more assistance in our Krishna conscious unfoldment by hearing from those who are close to us.
Yeah.
Is this recorded?
I agree.
Okay. By hearing from those who are closest to us, and even hearing from, persons, anyone. We can actually learn from anyone. That was another thing that I remember early on in our service with the Institute in Washington, D.C. Bhakti Tirtha expressed that if you're serious and sincere, you can learn something from anyone. There's some message. And we find that, in the 11th canto, the Avadhuta, Dattatreya, he's expressing that he learns from 24 gurus, and he goes throughout the society and he actually sees the different aspects of how he can actually learn through nature, how he can learn through different creation, how he can learn through even insects. And so what is our particular desire? Like the Brahmins, they desire these material things. What is our particular desire? Do we really desire to actually serve the Supreme Lord, serve the devotees of the Supreme Lord? What is our particular desire? And so that's some question that we have to ask ourselves. And one really important aspect in this regard is the difference of their hearing. They heard and did not hear. Whereas their wives, they heard. And how did they hear? They actually heard from the other Brijabasis ladies. And from that hearing, they heard in what way, with rapt attention. And so therefore they developed a love for the Supreme Lord. And that's the power of Bhagavad Gita, the hearing, beginning with Shravana. So what is the quality of our hearing? And Krishna, just as he sent the cowherd boys to actually receive prasad from these brahmanas, Krishna is trying to communicate with us in so many different ways, trying to reach us in so many different ways. But again, in this particular point, how are we receiving? We can even consider that Krishna is acting in the form of a guest, trying to knock on our consciousness in the many different ways through the world. I remember a particular class with Vaisheshika Prabhu, and he was expressing that the whole world conspires for our Krishna conscious unfoldment. And so how are we actually receiving not only, guests who may be representative of Krishna, but how are we receiving Krishna himself in the form of the holy name, the chanting of the holy names? And so are we approaching this chanting in the mood of the Brahmanas, or are we approaching the chanting in the mood of the Brahmana's wives. You know, are we approaching the holy name in the mood of ritualistic activity? Or are we approaching in the mood of trying to develop loving service in the mood that Srila Prabhupada recommends to us, and crying out and asking the Lord to please help us. Please help us. And so I see Henry, and every time I see Henry, he reminds me of Mother Yamuna, this great soul that's in our midst, was in our midst in the planet, and it is in our midst in her book, Yamuna Devi. We can read and hear about such a great personality. And I remember a particular pastime, and it was in reference to the quality of our actual chanting. And she was expressing how one time when she was in Juhu in Mumbai, and she was sitting in the association of the devotees, and devotees were chanting, intensely. And Srila Prabhupada came into the assembly. And as he came into the assembly, he sat right in the center and on his Vyasasana. And as he sat on the Vyasasana, he didn't say one word. However, he looked through the room and he gazed over all of the devotees. And as he gazed over all of the devotees in the assembly, the devotees she shared who were walking around in a circle, they sat down. And the devotees who were chanting, they may have been leaning back in a certain posture. They sat up in erect posture. And so everyone just changed the actual focus on the holy name. And she said that just by gazing over all of the devotees with his potency, he actually infused the enthusiasm of the devotees to actually chant the holy names with more sincerity and seriousness. And she understood, she felt the shift in the energy in the room. And she expressed that it was like Srila Prabhupada was in the center of a lotus flower, and all of the devotees in the assembly were like lotus petals. And then she expressed, and me and my foolishness, I pulled out a notebook, and then I began to write. And I had almost finished my initial 16 rounds. And then Srila Prabhupada saw me and said, Yamuna, what are you doing? And she said, I'm writing something. And he said, are you finished with at least 16 rounds? And she said, almost, Srila Prabhupada, I'm on 14. I have 2 more to do. He said, chant with attention. When you finish your first 16 rounds, then you can write. And she said, she always remembered that when we chant, as Mahatma Prabhus expresses, when we chant, chant. And so Srila Prabhupada in this verse 9, he expresses that there's a golden opportunity that we are afforded in this age of Kali Yuga. And he expressed that many cannot hear because of this particular desire. Our desires are not purified. And so what are our particular desires? How do we actually approach the Supreme Lord? How do we actually chant the holy names? How do we actually receive guests? And I'll leave before we end, just leave on this one particular point that our beloved Guru Maharaj expressed to us when he said that the success of your project is based upon how you receive guests. And from that, he coined the 4 principles of community building. And the first 2, of course, were to treat everyone you encounter as if the success or failure of your spiritual life depends on the quality of your interactions with them. And 2, think of the person you love the most and aspire to treat everyone with that same quality of love.
So in conclusion, the reason the Brahmanas did not have this consciousness is explained in a conversation with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Ramananda Roy, out of all glorious activities, which is the most glorious? And of course, we know that Ramananda Roy responded, the person who is reputed to be a devotee of Lord Krishna enjoys the utmost fame and glory. So the fact that we are one of the petals of the flowers, as Ekavira says, of the tree of Lord Chaitanya, we are famous, and we are having this understanding of what it means, to not just do things ritualistically, even though we might be growing in that process. At least we, when I say we, I mean Ekavira Prabhu and myself. So in that particular verse, there's also a statement just to close on how the consciousness of these brahmanas. And so Prabhupada explains in the purport, and from the Garuda Purana, he explains, it is said that out of thousands of brahmanas, one is qualified to perform sacrifices. And out of many thousands of such qualified brahmanas, experts in sacrificial offerings, one learned brahmana may have passed beyond all Vedic knowledge. He is considered the best among all these brahmanas. This is the devotee. And yet, out of thousands of such brahmanas who have surpassed Vedic knowledge, one person may be a Vishnu Bhakta, and he is most famous. Out of many thousands of such Vaishnavas, one who is completely fixed in the service of Lord Krishna is most famous. Indeed, a person is completely devoted to the service of the Lord certainly returns home back to Godhead. And people ask, well, where are the examples? So there's examples right at the Bhakti Center. Adipurusha Prabhu is an example. Henry is an example. When I think of Henry and how he just generously just gave everything to Krishna's service.
He receives guests.
And how he receives guests, it's just incredible. I can't even speak about how Henry received guests. So we have so many beautiful examples. And on that note, we thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Haribol.
Any comments, Adi Purusha Prabhu, with the icing on the cake?
Henry Prabhu, anybody? Anyone? Adi Purusha Prabhu?
Sorry, you're
muted. You're muted.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Fantastic class. We love you guys. Just bubbling up with the joy of the grace of your spiritual master. You made so many wonderful points. We can only reflect some of the things you said. The idea about how Krishna is very dynamic and he's working in our own particular service. We've spent many years with the shoe on the other foot, so to speak, of on Krishna's behalf, asking people to give a donation. And our experience is that today we talked a lot about how, these guys didn't respond properly. They were thinking of something else. But then behind it all, Krishna arranged that they were presented with an opportunity to engage in service, which Krishna does again and again and again and again. When you have that Sankirtan spirit and the service of book distribution and collecting donations, we're approaching so many people, and then Krishna gives them the opportunity, sir, devotional service, what do you think? And then, even if their first take is that, I can't do this, I'm too busy, I'm good, then Krishna works through the devotees, just like he did for those Brahmins, because the donation did take place. Krishna worked through the wives, and yes. They were presented with the opportunity, the choice to serve, and then, even though they didn't respond appropriately at first, due to the relationship with the wives who saw through their misdirection, they actually did. So many times we see people that when you first approach them, they're a little bit hesitant or doubtful or distracted, but then Krishna works through the devotee. That's the amazing thing. Krishna is so wonderful that he gives them a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
To the point where they say, it's their doubt and your faith toe to toe. And then there's a point where they say, well, okay, all right. And astoundingly enough, in our experience, most people, not just 50%, 60%, 80%, most people that we approach, after they have that exchange with the devotee, then they give the donation, and then they say, thank you very much. They actually express gratitude that we reached out to them by the grace of the spiritual master, and help them through that initial misperception to the point where they thought, yeah, I thank you for, giving me this chance. Thank you for, and they're giving us Lakshmi, but then they're thanking us for engaging them in devotional service. So we're all going to have that opportunity to reach out to others. Even Ambarish, Ambarish, the devotee with the Ford Motor Company, and he's a millionaire. He said, I was thinking, I'm never going to be a beggar. I'm a millionaire. I've given so much to this project, millions to that project. But now on the internet, there he is talking about the project in Mayapur and asking people for a donation for 1 square foot. Give this much, $100 or something, he said. And I realized, I was thinking, I'm never going to have to ask for donations. And Hare Krishna made me do it. And he says, I do it with great joy. And we're sharing this nectar. We're sharing the joy. We're sharing the benefit of engaging in Krishna service. So we're all going to be, the shoe will be on the other foot. Krishna approached us, and somehow or other, some devotee convinced us that this is good. And we have to give it to others. Prabhupada said, if you don't give it, you'll never get it. I'm sorry to talk so long. I'll go to Srila Prabhupada.
No,
God.
please.
How wonderful is Krishna that he does this for us.
Jai. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to be in your association and to hear from you.
Prabhupada.
Yeah. Give it back. Give it back. Yeah. Tree of Lord Chaitanya. He's the gardener. And he's always asking us, give it back, give it back. Anyone else would like to share your any reflections? I think it's in the chat.
I'm calling out Sundari.
Yeah.
Sundari, please share.
Hey, Adibo.
Hey, Sundari. Oh,
So
I
nice
expect
to see you guys. I'm crying inside. I
so
just wanted
beautiful.
to, it's so beautiful seeing you. I just wanted to share how amazing it is, like the association of devotees, and I'm realizing like I miss you guys so much, and just hearing you speak right now is just like filling me with so much joy. So I just wanted to share how grateful I am. And yeah, that's it. I miss your association. I'm so happy I got to see you guys and hear from you this morning.
Thank
Jai.
you, Sundari.
Thank you. Good to see you.
We miss your bubbly.
Yeah.
We miss you so much also. Yeah. When we think of Radha Muralidhar, or when we think of you, we think of Radha Muralidhar,
Aw.
because you gave up everything to be with them.
That's
Yeah.
sweet. Anyway,
People,
Haribo, I have to head out.
So in the
Hari,
chat,
Hari,
there are
I'm gonna go
notes.
to the chat. So
These are
Nana,
the
do you,
notes.
yeah. The mood of brahmanas performing ritualistic activities without being intentional. Mood of cowherd boys, loving Krishna. Okay. So these are the notes. All right.
Amazing.
Amazing. Okay. Who is the devotee and mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Okay, they're carriers of Krishna. Yeah, I thought that was a question. No, these are beautiful, beautiful notes. Wow. Nanda
We have
Bihari.
our local Ganesh, Ananda Manjari, the note taker. That's a service. She's taking it very,
Absolutely.
very seriously.
She's a wonderful scribe.
Yeah, she's preserving everything very carefully. I have a question. Ekavira Prabhu was describing very wonderfully how we should treat each and every devotee, maybe even non-devotee. I don't know how far Ekavira Prabhu goes in his kindness, but in such a way as though the success of our spiritual life depends on the quality of our treatment of that person. And I was thinking, as devotees in our service, sometimes we have to do things that aren't pretty, that sometimes we have to take decisions and execute. So how do we avoid drifting into being overly harsh, being overly angry when we have to do something that isn't pretty in devotional service? How does that principle play out in those situations?
Yes, that's a very good question. One thing, practical thing, is to first and foremost is not respond immediately in those given situations. You know, we can even just take a breath before we actually respond, and then we can move our thoughts can move, you know, from a point of possibly acting in the mode of passion, and move into the part of our brain, into the prefrontal cortex, where we actually think about what we're actually saying and doing, and not acting upon our immediate emotions. And one thing that I like to refer to is in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj expressed that the Vaishnava is so merciful that even by thinking of them or thinking about them, we invoke their blessings. And so by thinking of the spiritual master, by thinking of the exalted Vaishnavas, by thinking of Guru Parampara, we actually invoke their blessings, and then we can be empowered to actually speak to a person or implement a particular policy without some, you know, ulterior motive of, you know, without false ego. Those two things can actually help us, you know, by thinking of the spiritual master, thinking of the Vaishnavas, and breathing first. And so we have to also understand that what is our intent. By doing those things, we can understand our intent. Because yes, as you expressed, when you're in a particular role, we may have to make some decisions or implement something that could be perceived in the wrong way. But where is our heart? Where is our heart? And are we actually doing this for the best interest of the individual and not just the actual project? We have to think about both of those things. What is in the best interest of that particular individual? Because our projects are a conglomeration of individuals.
If I may add also, once my spiritual master, our revered spiritual master, His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, I was in the role of manager. And of course, as you said, and yes, we do, when you're a manager, you got to say things and do things. And people always, most of the time, don't really like you, and, you know, so many things like that. And so once somebody complained about me to him, and he called me and he said, Lila, read this page on Satsarup Maharaj's book of Vaishnava Compassion. And he said, sit down, go to this, and he told me the specific page. And so then I went, and then he said, and then when you're done, come back and tell me what you got from it. What were your reflections from that? And I was like, oh, Krishna, okay. So I did. And so the reflection I got that I thought was to help me was, you know, Satsarup Maharaj says, a Vaishnava knows how to speak palatable truths. Palatable truths. This is more than 30 years ago. And I still remember that. And so I went to him, I said, this is the only thing I got was like, that's what I got. And he said, good. Do you know what that means? And I was like, okay. And I can say it. And I never heard before. I'm still learning to speak palatable truths, you know, because sometimes in management, we do get caught by our different reactions, you know, to people and to activities. And it's a learning process, you know, it is a learning process. However, as Ekavira Prabhu said, our intention is so important. And intention is to see the humanity in everyone, to see as much as we can according to our capacity. Each person is sent to us in every single environment, you know, for us as Adipusha Prabhu shared, to give rather than to take. So that, yeah, palatable truths. Got to tell the truth. Just tell it in a way that perhaps can connect. Connection is our goal. How do we connect?
Thank you, Prabhus. Thank you. Ekavira Prabhu, you wanted to add?
Yeah, just one other point is that even after the interaction, contemplate and reflect and consider, what was my intent? How did I respond? Is there another way I could have responded to this person? Because sometimes we just, we just speak in a way that we want to change that pattern.
Yeah.
So we were given a do-over. So we haven't, and we will have another opportunity.
Yeah.
However, it's important to reflect and make sure that our intention was in the right place.
Yeah, Krishna tells Arjuna about that in, I believe, the 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, maybe 17, 14, or 18. He explains to him, about speaking harshly. I see Ananda Manjari, and I think it's almost time.
Yeah, do we still have time for the last question? We do?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll show myself to you. So
Hey, sweetheart. Angelica.
yeah.
I listened to your class the other day you gave. It was so sweet.
Thank you so much. I wanted to tease out a little more from the last point of Ekavira Prabhu, because when I was hearing your class, I remembered that recently Krishna was very merciful, that he arranged that I spoke with some devotees that actually shared, like, there was an act of kindness that they did towards them that actually was like a milestone in their spiritual path. And now they're like initiated devotees. And I thought, wow, I don't even remember doing it. And so then I was actually scared, because I was like, if this can be such a turning point, like, what about all those shortcomings that I have and moments when I may not act out of my best intentions, or like higher self, as it's called? And so I wanted to ask, like, how do we work with that when actually we do fall short, and it's painful to think about those actions also holding others back from advancing in their spiritual path because they may have negative impressions or something like that. Like, what do we do in those situations?
So my first thought, Ekavira's putting this on me. My first thought is, to accept that we will fall short until we become perfect. That embrace that. Once we embrace that we're on this path, become pure, and we're not there yet. And okay, Haribo. Jai Shishi Radhamurli Dhar.
Thank you, Ananda Manjari, for the question. Vajali Ekavira for the insights. Your treasure chest of wisdom and maturity in bhakti.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
so
Haribo. Thank you so much.
Okay, now is the darshan time. If you can, dear devotees, turn the cameras on. Krishna will take a look.
Govinda Adi Purusha Mahagajami Govinda Adi Purusha Namaharami Andani Yasyatane Vyave Imamaki Atyana Vihana Prananti Maya Gala Vivapatya Gomena Aham Tam Govinda Adipurta Namaham Shami Govinda Adipurta.
Okay, that was it. Thank you very much again, Vraja, Lila, Ekavira, Prabhus. Beautiful class, beautiful presentation, beautiful smile, Ekavira, Prabhu. Beautiful. Vraja Lila is taking very good care of you. We can tell. Okay. You're muted, Prabhu. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Look at your smile. You bring the smile out of me.
I'm a fool. But I'm blessed. We're blessed to be in your association once a month. And thank you so much for making yourselves available to this service. It's very
Thank you.
refreshing. And here's Justi and Ananda Loka. Ananda Loka, Hare Krishna.
Oh,
Ananda
Hare
Loka
Krishna.
and Ananda Loka.
Hari Hari, Hari Bo.
Hare Hare.
Jai, Hare Krishna. So nice to
Will-
see you. Hari
Yeah,
Bo.
William Moses is on the bus. And
Yay.
Mangi, Papi, Bruce.
Hey, Mangi
Prabhu.
is Slovenia. She's all the way from Slovenia.
Now see, William looks like he's on the subway.
Oh, Mangi.
Hey, Mangi, are you from Slovenia?
No, there's another Himangi from Slovenia. Sorry.
Okay,
you
no,
so
maybe this other Himangi from Slovenia is watching on YouTube. So Himangi from Slovenia, Haribo to you, Hare Krishna.
Hari
Okay,
Bo.
all right. Hare
William,
Krishna,
thanks for the
everybody.
heart.
Have a wonderful day. Give it to Krishna. No false ego, and speak the truth, but palatably, like Ekavira and Vraja. All right.
Ready.
Hare Krishna.
Ready.
Love you all.
Ready.
Hari Hari Bol.
Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna.